Today we're looking at standard 7.3. This is divided into two videos. The first one, this one, deals with the war in Europe. The second one is about the war in Japan. So let's jump into it and see what we can learn. The United States had a very complex relationship with Russia going all the way back to the end of World War One. If you remember, at the end of World War One, Russia actually pulled out of the war because it had become communist, or the communist revolution was going on, and so they backed out. Well, the United States didn't want to see anybody become communist, and so we'd actually sent troops into Russia to fight against communism. Well, that didn't work. Russia became communist, which left us with kind of an uneasy relationship because we'd tried to actively stop their current government from taking control. In addition to that, we had the period in the 20s called the Red Scare. That includes things like the Palmer raids, when people who were suspected of being communists were deported, or rounded up anyway, and arrested and interrogated and then deported. And Russia knew that was going on. They knew that we were fearful of communism. On top of that, we didn't trust Russia because Stalin, the leader of Russia, had signed an agreement with Germany that said they wouldn't fight each other. So, of course, we don't trust Russia because it looks like they might be in cahoots with Germany. Well, it doesn't take very long for Hitler to break that agreement. And when he does, we see that even though Russia isn't really our friend, we still have a common enemy. And so we're going to work together to help. At first, we're not going to help with troops or anything like that, but we will extend the Lend-Lease policy to them, which we had previously extended to England. If you've forgotten, Lend-Lease is basically just, we're going to let you use different tanks, guns, bombs, whatever you need from us. Pay us back when you can. We just want to make sure that you can stop our common enemy. This leads to an uneasy alliance between us, Russia, and England, who we'd already been allied with. This is the three guys you see here. Starting on the left, you see Winston Churchill from England. This is Franklin Roosevelt, and this is Joseph Stalin. Together they make up the big three, and they're going to meet throughout the war to try to plan their strategy. How are we going to deal with these various issues that have come up with Japan, with the Nazis, and what are we going to do after the war is over? How are we going to divide up Europe? The catch here is that we really still don't trust Russia. Sure, we have a common goal, but what happens after the war? Can they be trusted? And that's going to be a common theme throughout. Well, despite what you may think or have picked up from war movies, in the first few years of the war after the United States joins, most of the fighting in Europe is actually happening between Germany and Russia. We don't really end up in Europe in any massive way until 1944. And Russia takes the biggest brunt of the fighting. Germany continues to progress into Russia. They would love to take Russia over. And so Russia asks us if we would start a second front. In other words, they want us to move in through France to attack Germany, and that would divide up Germany's forces. They would have some fighting on the Eastern Front with Russia and some on the West with the Allies. This really makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, we have to make a choice. Are we going to start a second front coming from France to Germany? Or should we help out our good buddy Britain, who is still getting bombed by the German Air Force? England would love it if we would take our bombers and drop a number of bombs on German airports and airstrips. If they can't take off, they can't bomb England anymore. So we have to make a choice. Should we help our friend, England, and make bombers, or should we help our one-time enemy by invading Europe with a huge force to take the pressure off the Russians? As you might guess, we go ahead and choose to make the bombers and help England. This is successful. We do stop the bombing raids over England. However, hundreds of thousands of Russians die because of this choice. So Russia is going to blame us for how many people die. This pie chart over on the right is a little bit surprising to me every time I look at it. This shows the number of total deaths in World War II among the Allies. So this is just who we think of as the good guys. If you look at this, the United States is right here. We're the dark blue. Only 2% of the dead in World War II among the Allies were Americans. Now, it's still a huge number, and it's still a tragedy. But Russia actually has 65% of the dead among the Allies, which is a massive number. That means there are about 33 more dead Russians than there were dead Americans at the end of World War II. This population pyramid shows that. This is a recent population pyramid, 2013, so a couple years ago. And if you look at the older folks in Russia, look at the elderly. This is people from about age 80 up. The blue shows what percentage of the population is male, and the red shows female. There are far more females in that age range than there are males. That goes right back to this pie chart because so many males died in World War II. It's just a very interesting and sobering statistic. Well, the United States does decide we need to attack Germany a little more directly. But rather than invading Europe itself, we actually go into northern Africa. This is southern Europe here. This is northern Africa. Now, northern Africa is significant. Hitler knows that in order to continue to operate his tanks, his planes, all these things, we need oil. And so he's moving into northern Africa. He's controlling the entire Mediterranean Sea, and he's eventually going to move over here that you can't see on the map. That would be to the Middle East. Well, if he can get to the Middle East, he can get oil. So the United States launches Operation Torch, which is an invasion of North Africa that is designed to protect the oil fields in the Middle East. If he can't get oil, he can't win. In addition to that, it does take back the Mediterranean Sea, which is going to be great because at some point, if we control northern Africa, we can easily move across the Mediterranean into Italy or Spain or anywhere else. And of course, it also creates that second front. So some pressure is taken off of Russia. But they really wanted us to go through France immediately rather than kind of slowly through northern Africa. So still Russia's a little more happy with us, but not thrilled. Well, Russia is continually under assault, and this continues until a turning point battle, and that always should make your ears go up, because a turning point means that this is a battle that could show up on a test, okay? Germany's been pushing into Russia until they try to take the city of Stalingrad. Well, the city of Stalingrad is significant because the name, of course, it's named after Joseph Stalin, who's their leader. And really partly because of this and because of the pride issue, the Russians dig in and say, we will not let the Germans take this territory. The Russians are actually able to sneak behind the German lines and cut off their supply routes. So the Germans are kind of stuck in Russia. Well, they continue to try the assault on Stalingrad. They launch a number of artillery attacks against Stalingrad, which leads to bombed out cities like you see here. There are craters where the bombs have fallen. And really that makes for a great guerrilla warfare scenario. Russian soldiers hide in the bombed out buildings and in the craters. And every time the Germans try to take the city, the Russians, sometimes they get sniped. Sometimes they snipe the Germans. Sometimes they just get into close quarters fightings in these bombed out buildings. And because their supply lines are cut off, the Germans can't get resupplied every time they fail one of these assaults. And so the commander tries multiple times to surrender, but Hitler refuses to let him. And so in the end, the Russians crush the Germans. This is a turning point. From this point on, the Russians are moving into Germany rather than the other way around. Well, America decides that we and the British do need to end up in Europe. We need to go to the continent. Since we now control northern Africa, we do launch an assault on Italy, which very quickly surrenders. Mussolini himself tries to escape. He ends up getting captured and killed. And then the Italians drag his body around the city square, and he's beaten and spit on after he's dead. But the Nazis still have a foothold in Italy. And so we aren't just going to be able to march into Italy. We have to fight all the way up the boot into northern Italy, up into what will eventually be Germany. So we can't quickly turn that into an attack on Germany. This means if we're going to do it, we have to go another way. You're probably familiar with D-Day. This is the largest amphibious assault ever. The Allied forces, including the Americans, the British, the Canadians, the Australians, and a few others, get a number of assault vehicles. They load up men into vehicles like you see here, and they send them across the English Channel from England into Normandy, France. The goal is, if you look in the distance, they're going to take this beach. They're going to move up in the back. You see the rise. This rise is a hill or a cliff. And the Germans possess the cliff. They possess what's over the cliff. And so these men are tasked with taking the beach, climbing the cliff, and overthrowing the German installations, which is a huge, huge problem. Here again, you see the beach. This is a color picture, so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. But this is going to be very, very difficult. Many men will lose their lives. Here you see the actual invasion plan. The different countries are going to invade from England across the channel into these beaches here. This is Utah Beach, or codenamed Utah Beach, Omaha Beach, Gold, Juno, and Sword. So it's not just a single beach. There are multiple beaches across northern France. And then this is one of the beaches of Normandy today. You can see that they've laid out kind of an idea of where bodies would have been, just as a remembrance to how many people lost their lives in this assault. Well, the Allies do take the beaches of Normandy. They do take France, and they slowly move into to Germany. So Germany has no choice but to take some of those troops from the Eastern Front, where they're fighting Russia, to the Western Front, where now the rest of the Allies are invading. Hitler tries one more time to launch an offensive. This green down here that you see is Allied-controlled France. And Hitler, all these arrows that you see are tanks and troops and artillery that Hitler's sending into France to try to retake it. It's called the Battle of the Bulge, because you do see he's successful in creating a bulge in the Allied lines. It's the middle of winter when this happens, and when the skies clear, the fog lifts, we begin bombing again, and this really symbolizes the beginning of the end for Germany. All these gains you see here disappear, and now the Allies move into Germany. As this happens, the Americans, the British, and the French march in from the west, and so they take control of western and southern Germany, and Russia marches in from the east, and so Russia takes control of this red area. This will become East Germany. You notice right here there's another divided part. That's going to be Berlin. Berlin is divided in much the same way between the western portion with the British, the French, and the Americans, and the eastern portion, which is controlled by the Russians. And that's going to end Standard 7.3a for us. The next video will deal with the Pacific Front. I hope this is helpful to you. Remember, email me if you have any questions, and hope you're learning a lot. Thanks.